As an indecisive overthinker, I've struggled quite a bit with commitment in my life, but recently I've gotten better at it. This YouTube channel can serve as proof, as I think I'm probably nearing my 25th video that I've been publishing on a fairly consistent, regular schedule. And there's a couple of things I've learned along the way that have helped me get to this point, which I think could have been useful to know as a younger version of me. Mainly how to gauge my level of commitment to an endeavor and how to improve and nurture a sense of commitment. And so that's what I'd like to talk about today in the hope that it can help other people who are in a similar situation as I was. So a good starting place, I guess, would be to talk first about why commitment can be hard. And I think that, at least in my case, it was mostly by fear of making the wrong choice. So kind of wasting my time and energy pursuing a path that wasn't actually the good one or the right one, and that I would end up regretting to an extent. That's all known as opportunity cost. By investing your time and effort into one option, you're not you can't use that time and energy for other options, and that's a legitimate fear. I mean, you don't want to waste a lot of time pursuing the wrong thing. But on the other hand, right, you do need some level of commitment because otherwise you're stuck in analysis paralysis and you never make any progress. If you don't dedicate yourself to any one thing, then you don't really make any progress. And in the end, you kind of end up sacrificing everything. By refusing to sacrifice many options, you end up being stuck in inaction and basically wasting time by doing nothing and not dedicating yourself to anything. So what we want to aim at is somewhat of a balance because you don't want to be too committed, so to speak, and that you can never reconsider something and you just become kind of this, zealot, and you'll keep going no matter what, no matter how bad the decision end up being, either by complete fundamentalism or just because of the sunken cost fallacy. You're too afraid of recognizing that you've made a bad decision and all of the time and energy you've wasted, and so you keep going. So we'd rather avoid that, and we also want to avoid not being able to make any commitment. In my experience, the best answer to this dilemma is to make temporary conclusions that are open to reevaluation later on, but not all the time. And that's an important part. I think a big thing that can trip people up in being consistent and committed is that you're always reevaluating the choice. Like, am I doing the right choice? Is this the thing I should be doing? And if you basically spend all this mental effort and time analyzing and obsessing over whether you're making the right choice, you're really losing a lot of energy. Like, it's really going to make doing the work or advancing towards the project you're trying to make progress on really more complicated than it needs to be. So in order to make progress, right, we need to shut off the possibility of asking question and second guessing for a while. Right? We don't want to shut it off forever because if we're actually making a wrong decision, we need to be able to course correct later on. But what you want to do is just make a decision. Now it needs to be a decent it needs to be a decent decision in that it needs to be thought out rationally, and you also need to feel some level of emotional commitment, like it feels right and you feel ready to you feel ready to go through with this commitment. You kind of need both. um, if it's only emotional, it's probably not going to last very long if it doesn't make any sense to do so, to make this decision. And if it's only on an intellectual level that you've made a decision, but then you don't actually feel like it's going to be hard to actually follow through with your actions. Then I would recommend setting up a trial period. I would make them pretty long, so at least 1 month. Maybe I'd say the ideal, if you're trying a new project, I would say the ideal is more like 3 months. But basically, you want to make a decision to try to make consistent progress towards a specific commitment until a specific date. And at that date, only at that date, you will reconsider. You'll kind of make an analysis and say, okay, what have I learned from trying this experiment? Did it work out well? Is this actually feel like a good idea? Should I keep doing it? But in the meantime, from the start of the trial period to the end, there is no second guessing. There is no, should I be doing this? Okay, you just do it, no more questions. So to use some examples, a pretty striking one, I guess, and I kind of use it in several occasions, but if you had kids, you're not going to every single day, every single meal, start having a great internal debate about whether you should feed your kids, right? It's just like you just do it. There's no, you're not really having this protracted pro and con analysis. It's just not a question. You just do it. That's kind of the spirit you want to have for the while, and when you're trying, to go full commitment mode. To use examples from my own life, I have done this with my exercise routine, which I've been doing now for like more than 4 years, and I've been doing it every single day without skipping a single day for more than 4 years. In that case, I tried doing it for 3 months, and after the 3 months period, that was when I would make my decision. And after 3 months, I thought it was good and I should keep doing it. And so I've been doing it since then. Another example was when I first started this channel. Um, I first did 3 videos before starting the channel at all, just to kind of get a feel for it and see if it seemed doable. Once I had decided I would start this experiment, I didn't think to myself, oh, should I do this week? No, just 1 video a week, and I'm just doing it no matter what. And then after 3 weeks, once I've done my 3 videos to kind of get a feel for it, I I make a decision on whether I want to start the channel and start publishing videos. In my opinion, this is the best compromise because you're not making too much of a time investment. You're making a bit of a time investment, but there's no alternative. You get actual practical experience. And a lot of things that you might not have taken into account when you were just thinking about it in your head um, will pop up through experience, through actually doing it, and you have a real feel for how doable this is. So if you want to figure out whether you're really committed to something right now as it stands, I would say the best question to ask is, are you making tangible progress on this project consistently? Now I said project, but it could, for example, be a relationship. It could be a lot of things, but it's basically an area of life where you need to invest efforts and energy for a sustained period of time. Now, this presupposes that you've actually already made a decision and you've started working upon it. But that's like, I think the most, well, I say that's like a first tier of actual commitment, is you're actually making progress on something consistently. Then there's like a previous tier where you're making the decision. It's more the commitment of, am I going to even try this? And then even within commitment, there's like still several tiers. Like I say, I've reached a level where I'm making progress consistently, but I can still get a lot better. I could reduce the procrastination and be more effective and be more dedicated. The rabbit hole goes quite deeper, because then even in the way you structure your life, you can improve things and make decisions that are not directly related to this committed thing, to this project you're committed to, but that actually will have an influence. For example, being responsible with your sleep schedule will have an impact on how consistent you can be on working on stuff. It gets more complicated, but let's just focus on the basic tier for the moment, because that's the one I've somewhat mastered. So that tells you whether you're actually doing it, so to speak. But if you're watching this video, and in most cases, you're probably before that step where you're considering whether to commit to a project, or how much to commit, or how much to invest, etc. As I said earlier, I think there's two components to this process. One is more intellectual and logistical, and the other one is more emotional. So let's start with the intellectual logistical part first, because I think it's easier. Mainly, it's the technique I just mentioned before of making a trial period. An important thing to keep in mind during the trial period, and even after that, is that you want to actually be able to follow through on this commitment. A problem that people will have before committing is that we have these lofty ideals of the great things we want to do, but they're completely beyond us. If you set a very unrealistic goal for yourself, then you're not going to be able to actually do it, and then you're going to lose hope, and then you're going to abandon the project, right? So if we take the example of my exercise routine, it's actually doable for me because I only need about 10 minutes, a little bit less than 10 minutes, and I only need 2 square meters of floor and my cell phone to time myself. That's it. With that, I can do my exercise routine anywhere. And that's why I've been able to keep it for 4 years, because no matter if I'm, in a trip at someone else's place, or I'm in a hotel, or I'm sick, I can do it. It doesn't matter. I need almost nothing in order to be able to do it. Now, you're not going to be able to reproduce this exact context for everything you do, but to take another example, so for example, with this YouTube channel, as you can see, the production value and time I'm investing in each video isn't incredibly long. I started with about 5 hours of work per week, so that's 1 hour every day without including the weekend. So that's, for me, that was doable. but basically you want to reduce the scope up to a point where you can actually start making progress. Once you get good, you can increase the difficulty, but if you set up a super high ideal at the beginning, then you're basically guaranteeing that you're going to fail, and then you'll be disappointed with yourself and you'll give up. One thing I'm learning again and again is that the and that I'll probably cover in further videos, is that I think discipline is more about humility than willpower. It's about being realistic, you know? If you're actually committed and you really want to do this, you'll be okay with doing a non-glamorous, kind of shitty version at the beginning. Whereas if you're kind of just, in love with the idea, then you can see yourself doing incredible things and never actually do it. So I think that's kind of the first step, kind of humility and acceptance of the current reality, which isn't as nice as you'd like it to be. So that brings us to the second component, which is getting emotionally ready, or I guess like being aligned on an energetical level. And I'm not exactly sure how to describe this, but basically it's actually being capable of following through and investing your energy, right? Because like you can make a decision, like it's very easy to make an analytical decision. Like I'll always go to bed early because it makes sense and it's good for my health. Okay, but then are you actually going to do it every night? Probably not. And so that's the second component, which is more about emotion, energy, or whatever, like a more unconscious actually ability to do it. And I think that you need to build up a certain level of this emotional readiness, so to speak. That's kind of the first necessary milestone to even try. So in some case, you don't really need much. Like if you, for me, I didn't need any to do my exercise routine because it's just 10 minutes. Well, I guess it's the willingness to go through a little bit of discomfort in the morning and spend a little bit of time exercising, right? That's kind of that's not a lot of energy. But in some other cases, like if you're doing like some big creative project where you kind of need to be pretty vulnerable and all, then you might need more of this internal gumption, we'll say, to actually go through with it. And so the question becomes, how can you actually improve that? How can you work on building this internal willingness to actually tackle a project? So I would say there are three main ways to do this that I can think of. The first one is the most reliable, but also the less reliable. And what I mean by that is that it's simply natural proclivity. Some people are just very good at committing to stuff, and some people suck at it. And it's more complicated than just a simple binary where like some people are good at it, other people are bad. It also kind of depends on different situations. So for example, I depend. So for example, depending on the context, I'm both good and terrible at it. To take again my exercise routine, that was easy for me. Like sometimes there are certain types of decisions where once I've kind of made up my mind, it's very easy for me to do things. And I've several times in my life quit or started doing things cold turkey. I just decided to do it, and I'm just doing it. When I was a kid, I decided I would stop sucking my fingers, and I just did it cold turkey. Never did it again. During my year of study abroad in Korea, I started drinking pretty often, and then some members of my family started stressing, saying I was becoming an alcoholic, which triggered me. And so to prove them wrong, I stopped cold turkey to prove them that no, I wasn't. And as it turned out, I wasn't. I was able to stop cold turkey. But then, overindulgence on beer did start growing a pot belly. And so that's what motivated me to start doing exercise. And again, once I settled on my exercise routine, like what I was going to do, I just started cold turkey and I've been doing it since then. So in some areas, I'm good at it. In other areas, like more on working on the um, when it comes to kind of projects, creative projects where you have to work on them for the long term, I'm kind of good at getting overexcited and like doing a lot of work for a short time on a project and then completely giving up. That's my usual way of doing things, and that and I'm still learning on that front how to get better. So as you can see, you might be better in some instances than others. And if you're not good in one, I'd say this one is pretty intrinsic to who you are. Not to say that you can't improve, but it's pretty set within you, and changing it would take would take a lot of work. There are things in life we are just really good at naturally, and there are others we are really not good at naturally, and going against those natural weaknesses will take a lot of energy. And so I think that some advice which are just like, oh, have willpower and just be different from how you are, kind of miss the mark. because you're just not very good at doing this naturally. So it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you gotta have to use other strategies than just beating yourself up for not being a certain way. Because if you feel bad about not being very good at commitment, it's not going to make you better at commitment. So you should instead shift to a strategy that has better chances to work. So let's move on to other strategies. Unfortunately, none of those strategies are super easy, but they are the only one I can think of right now. So the second one is basically building up disappointment in yourself. This one is not very nice to experience, okay? So when you're before the stage of actually committing to something, you just have this idea like, oh, I would like to do this. Maybe, oh, I would like to learn how to play a specific instrument, or in my case, it was, oh, I would like to start a blog. And I had all this whole idea, but yeah, I'm going to start my blog and I'm going to do stuff and all. And so I was thinking this for years, but I was only doing very erratic progress. And so you're building up this vision of yourself of what you're supposed to be doing and how you see yourself, but then through your actions, you're proving it wrong over time. And so you start building up disappointment and resentment against yourself. And sometimes when it reaches a certain peak or it gets triggered in some way, you kind of reach a breaking point and you're like, okay, I'm really sick of this. I need to change something. And kind of going through this cycle can actually reinforce your emotional readiness, right? And I think that's a pattern you can see in people who tell you stories of like making drastic changes in their life, where it's just like you fail, you fail, you fail, you fail, you fail, and then you reach a breaking point and you're like, okay, I can't take this anymore. I really need to get serious now. So that's one way it's kind of unreliable. You can actively work on it. It's just like if you actually really care about something enough and you keep sucking at it, at some point maybe you'll reach a breaking point. And that kind of rejoins the idea of positive disintegration from Dabrowski. You can check it up on internet if you want, but this kind of idea of like having this image of who you want to be, like what you aspire to be, and then not being and being definitely not that good yet, and building up disappointment and suffering because you're not how you would like to be, building up data points of how you fail to meet that aspiration and reaching a breaking point, and then working on yourself through this newfound motivation and going through the cycle again and again is kind of part of this positive disintegration. And although it's not very pleasant, according to Dabrowski at least, it can allow you to actually get much better and do significant progress over a long period of time. But so that's another way of doing it. I get like that's one silver lining on failing repeatedly, I guess. And I guess that's like another form of litmus test of like, do you actually care enough about this to get to a point where not making any progress is going to create this breaking point? But that's not the most reliable way to just wait until the disappointment is too much. The last lever point I would say is clarity. And in my case, that played a big part. I mean, like all of the things I've mentioned have played a part in my own journey. But clarity can really help. Kind of and by clarity, I mean clarity of purpose. Like, what are you trying to do, and why does it matter? Why is it important? And how do you know that this is really the thing that you should be doing? Now, again, this gets a little bit tricky because it's easy to fall into this overthinking loop where you're only analyzing things and you're never actually taking action or never trying anything, and you just get stuck in mental loops. Nevertheless, in my case, I think it was a combination of reaching, a breaking point of dissolution in myself and getting more clarity, because along the way, during all those years where I was thinking of starting a blog but not doing it, I was still making progress on understanding myself, on kind of fleshing out my view of the world and what I'm trying to do. And I ended up reaching kind of another form of breaking point where I finally started seeing how a lot of the different things I care about and I'm thinking about are interrelated. So the initial breakthrough of clarity that propelled the start of my journey, which eventually got me to publish my blog and then start a YouTube channel, was thanks through finding a kernel of clarity. It wasn't great. Like I've been clarifying it much more since then. It never ends, I guess, but it keeps getting clearer. But there was a certain point where it finally makes sense. A component of it is probably about a form of duty, of purpose that's not about yourself, right? So it's more about like as in finding a good reason to do this, like you're actually doing it for a greater cause rather than just your ego, as in, because just like you want to perceive yourself a certain way, or you see yourself as this type of person that would do this type of things. I don't think, at least for me, that form of motivation isn't very strong, and it doesn't really lead to actual action. But like feeling like you're actually doing something meaningful, even if it's not doing a big impact, but you can kind of see like why it's important. You're kind of working for a cause or for someone rather than just like, oh, I kind of want to see myself in a certain way. That helps actually get started. Now, how you get there, I guess, is a long process of introspection, building your self-knowledge, and fleshing out your life direction, which again is like one of the main topics of this channel in general, and the things I'm interested in and I'm trying to help other people make progress on, I guess. So if that's of interest to you, don't hesitate to check out the rest of my videos, and if you enjoy them, subscribing and checking out also the other stuff I'm doing. In any case, I hope that you can find some use out of this video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.